Can somebody please tell me what's up with the Cold Steel design team and their apparent love for big, square, chonky grips? And I've reviewed a few of these already, but they went for a whole new level here. I understand square corners on a folding knife. That kind of makes sense. But there's a difference between trying to promote good edge alignment and, oh, I think it would be awesome if we made this feel like a piece of lumber. And this time, yeah, they really went for it. This grip is 1 inch thick. In the hand here, it's 1 inch wide. So congratulations, we've achieved square. Out of the box edge, I'm going to say not very good. Flat ground blade, but yeah, secondary edge bevel pretty steep, and it just sort of fades out down here at the bottom, so that's not very clean. We are going to do the impact and chopping tests, but let's take a look at paper as is before I make any improvements. It's not shaving sharp, but okay, it's doing this. It's a little toothy. How about getting through some cardboard? Okay, that was unexpectedly impressive. The big blocky grip is not the only issue I have with the build of the knife, but it's definitely going to play into our discussion of the sheath that it came with. If you haven't seen it already, refer back to the video I did on the Cold Steel Chieftain. You'll see some similar design features in the sheath, but since this one is a much less expensive knife, there's definitely cost cutting. First of all, no leather lacing, just a single stitch seam. No brass brackets, and no removable straps. These are just one piece all the way around stitched in place. And, okay, I can't imagine how labor-saving, cost-cutting this actually was, but for whatever reason, there's only one hole in each one of these straps, so they're not adjustable at all. I mean, how hard or expensive would it have been to add that in? Also, like the Chieftain sacks, well, as it is now, hung from the straps, point of balance does pull the hilt down, which risks the knife sliding out during carry. You do have a plastic-coated piece of string here to tie it in with. But, okay, I don't know if this is going to be the actual point of balance or not, because, all right, context. As usual, the knife and the sheath were shipped wrapped separately. So I'm assuming this is the first time the knife's been in the sheath. Is there any break-in that needs to happen? Well, probably. As you can see, this folded over sheath is still pretty, well, teardrop shaped. Over time, it might fit the blade better. Right now, it's really snug, and we'll get to why that's not a good thing. But speaking of snug, all right, if you compare the length of the sheath to the length of the blade, there's an implication that this should be, when fully sheathed, the grip should be recessed in. And I've seen pictures of that grip recessed in about that far, which would give, well, probably great retention. But as is, there is no way this big blocky piece of wood is fitting in that sheath. But worse, all right, the Chieftain sacks, worn from the straps, is oriented so that the blade is being carried edge up. This one is oriented edge down, but the stitching seam is over here, which means every time I draw and resheath it, this blade is cutting in to this sheet of leather. How long is that going to last? And what were they thinking? So, yes, I am going to reshape this grip to fit my hands before I do the impact and handling sections of the video. And I think that'll make some magic here, just like it did with some of the recent reviews I've done on cold steel knives that came to me with really board-like grips. But before I do that, I'll give you a look at the knife as it came to me. Build quality, fit and finish specs, and for that I'm going to be looking down at my notes to give you the metric as well as the imperial. First number, about $82 US is what I got it for at Chicago Knife Works. I'll put the link down in the description below. So the Woodsman is definitely significantly cheaper than the Sheath sacks, and you can see it's a lot simpler, a more workmanlike design, but I find it actually quite appealing. Like the Sheath sacks and a lot of cold steel swords, 1055 high carbon steel, which has proven to be very durable, and that Sheath sacks really impressed me in those impact tests. This one is even beefier. So will it do better? Well, we're going to find out. Like the Sheath sacks, my hardness files are saying that it's somewhere above 55 HRC. Maybe not much. But again, the Sheath sacks did an awesome job. We'll see how this one does. Now, that initial edge test, I mentioned that secondary edge bevel is pretty steep, not really even, and sort of just fades out down here, not very clean, not shaving sharp, but I will do the impact and chopping tests before I improve the edge. Speaking of improvement, okay. Flat ground blade with what I would consider kind of a Warncliffe profile, yes. So very straight edge, curve forward. Now, shaping of the blade is not bad at all. It's just very, very little rippling visible. But one thing that is definitely visible that looks really sloppy, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, about right there, there's a transition. We're above that line. I don't know if it's from a wire brush or a coarse buffing pad. You can definitely see some scoring here that just suddenly terminates, and then below it on both sides is a mirror finish, and that just looks really, really sloppy and unfinished. But one of the things you've seen me do to blades like this that come with this chrome looking finish is, yeah, I'm going to patina it, I'm going to blacken it, so that's going to go away. Otherwise, the shaping of the blade is just pretty clean. Full tang construction, visible all the way around. Unspecified hardwood scales with a lot of stain I can feel slathered in there. Attached with two, well, kind of smallish looking brass pins. So that's potential failure point. We'll see. But that would be an easy fix if it does come loose. Now, blade length, it's shorter than the Sheath sacks at, well, cold steel says 11 inches. I'm measuring 10 3/4, so 27 centimeters. Width, it's a pretty straight profile until it tapers off. So that's 1 7/8 inches, about 4.75 centimeters wide. Thickness, yeah, it's thicker than the Sheath at a pretty consistent 5 millimeters, which also goes through the tang. Now, grip length, it's a little hard to measure, but if I'm going from this point to this point, that is a really generous 5 inches, so about 13 centimeters. Overall length, 17 1/4 inches, about 44 centimeters. Weight, 20 ounces, 567 grams. So it's got some heft to it without feeling at all unwieldy, despite having a grip that is, as I mentioned, 1 inch by 1 inch, pretty much perfectly square. Point of balance is me putting my finger right in front of the grip scale, so maybe 1 centimeter and change. So let me go reshape the grip, and I'll be, well, from your point of view, right back. All right, the reminder for the repeat viewer, or warning for the new viewer, if you're looking for hard field craft, testing of knives, that's not what my channel is about. Hopefully I can give you the collector's perspective and the martial practitioner's perspective. And hopefully I do it well enough that you keep watching. But I have heard concerns about the durability of this blade, specifically down here at this end. One, yeah, the potential for those small little pins to loosen up. And two, well, I can't confirm this myself, but somebody had heard that perhaps it's not a solid full tang under here. Perhaps it's skeletonized, and that could be a failure point. Well, if it ever comes apart, I'll let you know. Now, the tests I do run on my blades are designed to test their durability through some basic kinds of impact. I'm looking for fragile edges, fragile blades, fragile builds, and I'm also looking to see how the tool translates impact, shock back into me. Now, I did take the time to round off these scales. They're not done yet. But my first test against my pal, who I've named Stab Him. If you've been watching, you already know who Stab Him is. Multiple layers of thick cardboard backed up by a couple of inches of compressed brown paper bag, paper backed up by wood. Thrust into the pel in forward grip, and also flipped it around and did it with reverse grip. Penetration was pretty impressive, and kind of sinking my hand into this riser right here, yeah, it didn't budge, nor did it give me any uncomfortable kickback whatsoever. Plus, with the dynamics of this knife, and we'll talk about it in martial handling, being able to beak strike for penetration with this blade shape, yeah, that's another impressive thing. It just seems to want to lead with the tip. But then I took it out to next test, striking it into hard bamboo, and I did it in forward grip and reverse grip. And I intentionally hit that hard target at really bad angles. I'm trying to induce an edge roll, looking for a fragile edge. Also, again, looking to see how it's translating that shock back into me, and it held up just fine. There is not a mark on that edge. I also felt pretty good doing it. I felt like I had quite a bit of authority. I was actually kind of scared for the hard bamboo. Thought I'd have to get another piece out. Next test, a little bit of utility use. Shaved on some hardwood boards, did that really well, even with this factory kind of not great edge. It made a great tool. Chopped into the boards. Again, it wasn't so much about what this did to the boards, but did it do anything back to the knife or to my hand? It was really comfortable doing that. I felt a lot of authority, and yeah, it's really choppy. Nothing came loose yet. It's not a very long test, but yeah, if this is prone to easy failure, it might show up there. So I went ahead and moved on to batoning, and yeah, it works really good for batoning. Any damage? Well, surprisingly, it's interesting, on one side of the blade there's not a mark on it. On the other side I got just a little bit of scratching, that's it. But the next thing I am going to do, well, finish the grips, and going to put my usual Nazgul Sith Lord patina on it. I'll go ahead and do that, and then we will talk about carry and handling. Before we get into carry and handling, let me show you my, well, at least current solution for this sheath. First thing I did was I soaked it, oiled it, fit it better to the shape of the blade. Not so much of a big open teardrop shape with a lot of extra room in there. That also took a lot of pressure off the inside of the sheath where that edge was rubbing against it. And speaking of reshaping, I did stretch out the mouth of the sheath to fit, well, the new grip scale profile. This allows that grip to be sunk into that sheath about 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch, which is exactly how much of that blade length will fit in here. And that's given me actually some really nice retention and a thumb break. So we'll see how that works in handling. As for the straps, all right, being that they're not removable, I did consider just cutting off the extended bits, but before doing that, what I'm going with is putting some extra holes in here, making the loops as small as possible so they still fit around my belt, but hold this kind of uptight against it for minimal play, and let's see how that works. All right, for the bigger picture when it comes to misadventures in carry, refer to the video I did on the chieftain sacks for some important lessons learned about the sheath design, including, yes, using those straps that go all the way around the sheath. Just thread a belt through those for scout carry because they go all the way around. You can orient the blade in either direction in a lot of different positions. It's very versatile, but I wanted to try to give these longer straps a chance before I just cut them off. Now, I did shorten them up as much as possible to reduce how much this is flopping around. So it's a lot more secure, but you can still see one problem. Even with the knife into the sheath as far as it's going to go, point of balance is still pulling it hilt down. Now, right now, with the grip inside that leather, I'm getting some pretty good retention, but I'm betting that's going to change with break-in, and I'm going to need to rely on a lanyard, and I don't want to do that. But then it gets worse. Because these straps are not removable, they're also not reversible. And their position is making me carry the knife in one direction only. If I try to flip this around the other way, these buckles are really, really sharp and dig right into me. So it's limiting me. So what do I got? I could slide it all the way around behind me and draw it pretty easily with my right hand, but I can't reach it with my left. Also, it's pretty big and chunky. You really can't sit down on it. That limits my movement, my activity. So I've kind of reduced myself to two positions for practicing with this. Strong side hip, either on the side or in the front of the hip. Now over here on the side, I can still reach it with my left hand, do a thumb break and a draw. With my right hand, I flip my hand over into a cavalry style draw. Thumb break, draws really smooth. But reverse grip ice pick, yeah, we have a different problem altogether. I move it around to the front of me, reach it much easier with my left hand. Right hand though, yeah, that's not working for me, so I have to rely on the reverse ice pick. And the problem here is, well, equally about the belt. This particular belt I'm wearing allows the knife to slide around. If it had points to secure it, I'd have something to pull against. But over here on the side, my retention right now is so good it's actually working against me. When I go to pull this way, the sheath wants to go with it. I can make it come out, but it's a bit of a fight, a bit of a struggle, a bit of a delay, which I might not have time for in an emergency. However, with this belt anyway, if I move it around the front, when I go to draw it in reverse grip, the straps collide with the buckle, it stops the sheath, and allows me to get the knife out with minimal fight. Am I going to continue to go with this system? Am I going to just go ahead and cut those straps off? I honestly don't know yet. Alright, so I improved the edge. I gave the blade the Mike's Chemical Romance Nazgul Sith Lord treatment. And it turned out this time really pretty and swirly. I don't think the camera's doing it any justice. Finished and lacquered the grips. Let's talk about the result in handling. I'm having trouble describing it, but it's awesome. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's fair to compare this in the way it feels and handles and performs to the chieftain sacks. These are entirely different. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I can compare this to any of my Bowie knives. If I had to make a comparison to any of the blades in my collection, believe it or not, bear with me, I'd say kukri. And you're going to say, Mike, you're nuts, because this is obviously curved forward, it's got a big old recurved belly, and it's got to be heavier in the blade, right? And yes, all of those things, but when I close my eyes and I hold them both extended and move them around, this is the closest thing that this is similar to. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Geometry of the blade combined with the geometry of the grip. It really does want to lead with the tip, Now, when I'm using the blade in a choppy utility way, yeah, I can employ it that way, just like I can with a kukri. But in moving it around in martial application, yeah, it's trying to lead with the tip. And speaking of that, comparing it to a bowie. Think about in North American bowie knife, when you flip the bowie knife around to use the back of that clip point, trailing point to do those beak strikes. Okay, you have the exact opposite effect here. Unless you're going for the Samurai X Rurouni Kenshin, I just want to hit people with the blunt side of the blade, there's no point in holding it that way, because when you flip it around, you're getting all of those devastating mechanics in the cut, slash, and snap cut. It does also affect, of course, tip angle as you're thrusting and stabbing, but I'm finding it really easy to employ the point, and yeah, the shape of the grip, that riser does prevent your hand from sliding up there without giving you any discomfort under impact. But the shape of that grip, this thing just wants to roll. So moving it around in circular cuts and snap cutting, it's got a ton of authority and responsiveness and speed in the snap cut for a knife of this size and weight. I could see it having a lot of appeal to me. It already does, actually, as a martial tool as well as a utility tool. And of course, you put those two things together and that makes a great balance. Now, as a utility tool, do we still have a concern with durability in terms of the handle scales and what might be under the handle scales? Sure. And if with future use I experience any failures, have to do any repairs, I will absolutely do an update. But I have to say, for what I spent, and with a little work to make it fit my hand, and improve the appearance a little bit, and that was just for me, I am really, really pleased with this. It is just a pleasure to have in hand. It works for me. It responds to me. Flipping it around in the reverse grip, yeah, it was pretty good here too. Unexpectedly so. So it's a little fat in the grip for me to want to finger twirl. So you'll notice I am defaulting to the better, safer pinch flip when I do that. But yeah, it feels right. It feels great in many unexpected ways. I had a sense that this would be different in a good way. I just didn't expect it to feel this good. All right. So potential to be continued. But let's get our conversation going. If you have any questions about this, if you happen to have one, or a similar sax you want to talk about, recommend to me. Get our conversation going. Otherwise, as always, thank you so much for watching, following my journey, subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, and I hope to see you back for wherever this is going.